Thank you, Greg and Zach, for being here. My name is Armida, and I'm a protocol researcher at Messari. So right now, we are going to do a little bit of overview about what Akash is for people who don't know. So Akash is a decentralized cloud computing which infrastructure which kind of facilitate as a marketplace between the buyers and the sellers. So basically, if you require GPUs or any computing power, instead of like going and paying premium to, for example, AWS or any companies for high prices, you would come to Akash and then use the underutilized computing resources of anyone who can share. So one of the beauty of this is that because it's decentralized, it takes the power of the very centralized companies such as AWS and Microsoft Azure and so on, which basically takes over like 60% of our computing resources and gives the power to people. So thank you, you two, for being here. And so just getting into the conversation around, these big centralized companies is, do you see any threats in terms of the regulations and also like these big companies lobbying the government to ban the decentralization? And you guys?
Yeah, so it's interesting how, especially with the AI, there's a whole push from people that have self-interest in making sure AI is closed, uh, pushing and lobbying to keep AI closed. And this is not new, right? And this happened historically in America. If you think all the way, it goes back to like 18 late 1800s, where we had the railroads. Effectively, the first sort of like major capitalistic push in America were, were lobbying to get land grants from the government. So effectively becoming real estate companies, right? So we're seeing something similar in terms of behavior with the current incumbents, especially OpenAI and Microsoft and Amazon and Google's of the world that are advocating with a lot of resources to keep AI closed under the threat of national security or this super AI coming in eliminating humanity and really crazy scenarios. And we are spending a lot of time, having to spend a lot of time on the Hill fighting some of these misconceptions. And uh, on the bright side, I think we're winning. The folks on the legislation, both in the House as well as Senate, understand this is a common thing. The powerful incumbents tend to do, and the general notion is that we're not going to legislate or regulate AI unless there's concrete damage. So, so we're in a way we're standing on a solid ground, but also it's also scary because it's open ended as to what the concrete damage could be, right? So the scenario of AI, I believe, is going to accelerate humanity beyond. I think AI, what's happening right now, is going to make us type one civilization in my lifetime, and that's what we have with AI. But on the other hand, it is an accelerant. It's going to accelerate as much as it accelerates good things, it also accelerates bad things, right? So I'm more worried about bad actors using AI for doing concrete damage, and that leads to regulation that may not be great. But the counter argument is like, if AI is open, the counter, what do you call, the tools to counteract bad behavior can be developed by good people. So it's like, it's in a very delicate scenario, but what's real is we got to decentralize before. And decentralization is the answer for crony capitalism, right? Like, if we had blockchains in like early 20th century, we wouldn't have the regulatory, climate that we have today. Regulation was an answer to crony capitalism, um, and it evolved to this massive bureaucracy that it shouldn't have, but that's why it came about, and also led to a rise of socialism. So there's a lot of political risks of having a free market economy that's not regulated. But on the other hand, it also stifles innovation. It also slows down. So I think decentralization is a perfect answer to this like problem, this corruption problem we have with capitalism.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, I'm 100% in decentralization, and one of the beauty is that, for example, like you have known that companies like, AWS, when the company is doing really well, they either shut down or, for example, they try to acquire the company. Whereas, like in decentralized system, you don't really have that power, and the power is to people. But where comes, the issues with, as you mentioned, like malicious actions or the bad actors? Is there kind of a way or protocol to be able to mitigate those issues? That's I know this is a standard for most of the decentralized, especially deep-end companies like DVPNs or whatnot. But how would you try to mitigate those malicious actors?
Uh, so so yes, Akash is a permissionless network. Anyone can use Akash and no one's going to stop you. But that also means we're going to have bad actors consuming Akash. So I'm of the belief that, you know, speech should be free, but you having to listen to someone speaking is optional. So, you know, so Akash as a protocol should be free for use, but should an application be served by a provider is up to the provider. So in a case like a malicious actor using a provider, the provider should be able to shut them down. Of course, the malicious actor could go to another provider that is willing to serve the content, but as long as there are no providers willing to serve the content, they will not be using Akash. So, in a case where you have universally immoral or bad things like, say, child pornography or something of that nature, right? No one wants to host. Well, you're not going to have that. So the community self-regulates and self-moderates, and we're making it easy for providers to have the tools to moderate by themselves. Like, since if you host a website, it's a public website, right? So you can actually see by monitoring your IP addresses, right? So, um, but if it is a politically questionable content where maybe half the country disagrees with you and half the country does not, you're going to find a provider that agrees with you to serve the content. So you're not moderating or censoring political speech, but your system has a self-regulatory capacity to moderate really bad actors, just like letting the people decide what's good and what's bad. The people that actually host the content decide what's good and what's bad instead of a regulatory arm or instead of a bunch of people sitting in a room and deciding what's good or not, right? So that's my stance on free speech. I mean, speech should be public. Speech should be free. Without free speech, we will not be in a position to understand the real problems, and the real problems are the real bad people in the world. And in order to catch them or like to solve the problems, we need to know what the problems are. So by censoring somebody is not the solution, because a problem censoring something is just putting a band-aid on the problem and not really getting to the root of the problem, right? So the way you get to the root of the problem is let people speak so we understand where they come from, or and we can trace back. And it's actually easy to trace on Akash. So if you're using Akash for a bad thing, it's very easy to trace. It's on a blockchain, right? It's very easy to trace the transaction, and it's very easy to someone has your IP address because the provider at least has your IP address because you're accessing the provider in a peer-to-peer manner. So, so yeah, so the system self corrects by itself, which is a beauty of a crypto system.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about, computing power and decentralizing that. And we've seen a lot of, deep in sectors are growing at this time, but most of them, I mean, we just had a panel before, it's on Solana, but I know Akash is Cosmos based, which for people who don't know, like you're able to have a sovereign chain and then horizontally scale. So, how do you think, even in this growth of decentralization for the computing power, Akash is going to differentiate itself? And what do you see oversee? How do you oversee like 2, 3 years from now?
Um, how do we differentiate from others in Solana?
Bas-
So Akash is so think people don't know about why Akash was created in the first place. So, go back 2016, we created Akash to be the first alternative to closed cloud, right? Because internet has evolved on decentralized open source software, right? And that's how we have the biggest innovation known to mankind, right? Um, and now we have this, through this decentralization, we have this heavy centralization that was created as a coordination layer, but ended up being this massive invisible layer that acts like a tax collector. All of us pay taxes to Amazon's and Google's, Microsoft of the world without realizing you're paying taxes. Half of every transaction you pay to online services goes to a cloud provider, and you don't know who these people are, right? So, and we saw with what happens with CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike went down, took down our entire infrastructure because somebody pushed bad code. I mean, that is the fragility we have at what we consider to be national security, infrastructure that protects the national security, right? So, there's some of the what do you call symptoms of a deeper problem, which happens to be centralization, and a lot of us, both in the industry as well as academy, in academic circles, realize that if we let hyper centralization and hyper concentration in the cloud, that's detrimental to our society, like what's happening with GPUs today. Last year it was impossible to get GPUs at Amazon. Amazon would sell GPUs to the highest bidder, and OpenAI had a lot of money, right? Uh, so, there was an effort called SuperCloud in 2015, a paper written by Cornell that proposed an idea where if we can connect cloud-grade compute into the supercluster, we can effectively decouple the control plane from the resource plane. And we thought that was an amazing idea to be decentralized because with decentralization, we can reach places where centralized structures cannot, like underutilized compute, which turns out there is 85% of the current compute in data centers are underutilized. So we originally created Akash to be this open source cloud, which still is open source cloud, the only open source cloud, and decentralization as a way to sustain the network. Because without decentralization and crypto, there is no economy to sustain open source software. We tried different models and failed. So we're in it with a purpose to create a truly open source cloud, and we theorized about machine learning and cloud edge computing in 2018 paper. We specifically said Akash is extremely relevant in the machine learning era or AI era because the costs are going to go go extremely high, right? And we predicted that, and it happened exactly. So we didn't come to be the crypto for AI. We came to solve the deep problems that were rooted in our society. So that led to the choices we made to build a product. For example, Akash is the only open source cloud that has that is permissionless, fully permissionless, and that has a global orchestrator that is significantly powerful than anything out there. It's been around for about 4 years. It has not gone down a single time. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of nodes connected with no DevOps person managing all the nodes, right? So it's like phenomenal piece of engineering just from the distributed system standpoint that the world has never seen before, right? So a lot of the new protocols are launching, and that's closed source. Maybe I don't know how we can call a closed source system decentralized, right? Because they're afraid of open source. It's such a controversial or like contrary, a different view from what we think open systems should be built upon, which is open source software. So a lot of the new systems are in it to extract value, not really free the value to be frictionless. So that's what Akash is founded upon. And true to his nature, it has a community that was born out of this like need to open source the cloud. Yes, with closed source you can go fast because you control the whole thing. But with open source you can go far. So if you really want to reach planetary scale, I'm talking about planetary scale in the sense like today what we have, the need of compute is nothing compared to what we will have in 5 years. For context, GPT-4, which is a model by OpenAI, to train GPT-4, we needed about 10 megawatt capacity for a data center, and uh, that's increasing by a half an order of magnitude every year. So this year we'll need 50 megawatt capacity data center. Next year we'll need 250, and year after that is 1.2 gigawatt capacity that comes from nuclear. So that tells you the amount of capacity we need. And Gartner did a study with the compute needs by 2030. 5% of global GDP will be spent on compute. The only way we can get to that scale is by having decentralized permissionless systems, right? And next we're going to, I mean, with Starlink and this incredible like innovation in wireless technologies, I mean, there's going to be a phone uh, to satellite internet very soon. And when that happens, we're going into satellite. We're going out of space. So we're going to not out of space, right? So we're going to have a network that's so distributed and so disconnected that I cannot see a future where you have one coordination, one company coordinating all these resources, but rather a small, a decentralized network that's peer-to-peer in nature because it adds resiliency and also gives the sovereignty to the people that own these nodes to participate in a larger cloud. So that's why it's very, very important to stay decentralized. No matter how attractive centralization might be, yes, you can go super fast. We can git push code and update in like in a matter of minutes, right? Of course, right? But that is not why what that is not why we are here. We are here to build open systems, and I'm not very happy with the direction most projects are taking. There are a few projects. There are exceptions always, right? There's a project called Asana. There's a project called Flux. There's a project. I mean, most Filecoins of the world. All these are the original products that launched maybe in before 2000 were true to the values, but the new projects that I'm seeing are going in a direction that is very not aligned with our purpose to be here doing what we're doing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the reason why we are here and mainnet as well to have everything permissionless and open source. I mean, there are always bad actors that there is no way that we can mitigate. For example, like changing the code or doing something that is not good. But obviously, that's why we have the validators and all the people that they can, make sure that the system is operating very well. So, speaking of the economy, I know Akash has a very interesting model in terms of the pricing, which is the reverse action pricing. So, it's very cool because that's exactly the opposite of what the centralized ecosystem are doing right now, where they, for example, if there are small companies, they get outbid by the larger companies who can pay more money. But the issue with the other way around is that don't you think that we are going to have like, issues where when the sellers that they have more resources, monetary resources, they would outbid those wealthier, like outbid the ones that, they don't want to bid for a smaller price?
What I would say there is fundamentally what Akash does is it gives more users more choice, right? So the marketplace is completely open. And that's exactly what you want. You know, with the decentralized system, with the permissionless marketplace, you just want to surface more choice to the users. And that's what Akash does really well. So you have a wide range of providers at a wide range of price points, and that gives the user more opportunity to dial in exactly what they want at the price that they're willing to pay. So what we see on the network today is essentially we have AI developers who maybe are a little more price sensitive. They come in and they choose a provider that matches their ability or their financial resources at any given point in time. We also have, venture backed companies that are using Akash. They have a lot more, probably they're price insensitive fundamentally. They want exactly the resources they want, and they're very flexible on price. So from my standpoint, really what you want to see in a decentralized system is more choice forced to the users, and then leave it up to the users, on the network to organize themselves, and don't let the protocol itself put a finger on the scale in one direction or another.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you would never know like which, way to go is going to be right. Like we've seen protocols that as soon as they had like even the subscription model, because it's very similar to what other Web2 companies are doing, and then they've seen a huge surge in demand. So, yeah, so stuff like this are very interesting. And speaking of, ecosystem, because these marketplaces, they all have two sides, supply and demand. So we kind of touched upon, the supply side, that, the partnerships and all the activities that Akash is doing. But what are the strategies and initiatives in terms of adoptions of the new users and just educating them to increase the demand on the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite stories at the moment is a researcher who's a PhD in material science. He's in university, and what he's doing is protein folding for drug discovery. So he's within the university, and fundamentally he's running these simulations on the university's supercluster. And what happens is he leaves university, wants to go into industry, and he finds that he no longer has access to the supercluster, and he goes to one of the large hyperscale cloud providers, fundamentally cannot make the finances work, right? Because he's running a bootstrap business. He doesn't want to raise funds. He goes and searches, and keep in mind, this is someone that's completely outside of crypto and decentralization, goes to the market and essentially says, I, I'm on these hyperscale cloud providers. What are the alternatives? How can I get lower cost GPUs? Finds Akash organically, onboards himself permissionlessly, gets involved with the community, starts running these protein folding workloads on Akash without us even knowing, engages with the community, gets involved, and then we meet him in the community totally organically. So there are things that we are doing to push, to find new cohorts of users that, mostly from the Overclock Lab standpoint. But fundamentally, the way that I think Akash's adoption works the best is when people find it organically, when they have the intent to deploy at, on resources that are very high performance at a very, competitive cost. And when that all that value gets created and people find it, they're going to seek out the network and onboard themselves. They're going to realize that value.
Yeah, to add to Zach, so there are two primary areas we're investing in terms of getting demand, right? So one area is distribution. So plugging into large ecosystems where there are machine learning engineers. So NVIDIA, for example, integrated Akash, NVIDIA Brev, which is a fine-tuning product by NVIDIA. You can go to Brev today and request an instance from Akash. So that way, NVIDIA is using Akash to find NVIDIA compute with NVIDIA's customers, right? Because Akash gives cloud capabilities. It's a great use because NVIDIA is able to serve their customers who they have to turn them away because they don't have GPUs right now. So we're finding use cases like that. We have Prime Intellect, which is also a computing, decentralized training platform that's using Akash and offering Akash as a option for their customers. We have Neural AI, which is a 3D engine generator that integrated deeply into Akash and offering Akash their users a service on Akash. And we have companies like Venice. I mean, Venice is a privacy optimized tool that's integrating Akash, and now they're offering an API service where we can spin up your own model and using Akash, right? So these distribution channels are very, very important for gaining more users to Akash. And the big attraction for a lot of the integrators is, well, Akash is open source, and Akash as a permissionless model that allows them to build a long-term sustainable business where they know once they get profitable, I'm not going to pull their plug, because it happens a lot with Amazon or Google's of the world. If you build a successful business on top of Google API, they will give you two options when you get successful: either get acquired or either get shut down. It's a very known thing in typical companies. So with Akash, you don't have the risk. You have the confidence that you can build a business and have the guarantees that you're going to get the resources. So that's one thing. A second thing is improving our product itself. Like we said, our primary goal is to ensure that we have self-custody and we have the true thesis of what decentralization should look like. So we don't take shortcuts of putting a login and giving you an ability to give you email or whatnot. We never collect email addresses, right? But how do you reach the mainstream audience without collecting? So we're launching a new product on top of console that allows you to stay decentralized, maintain self-custody, but at the same time, remove all the friction of owning all the crypto, owning having to needing to own crypto to use Akash. So that way we can get to know the user directly. So we're doing both, improving our software as well as distribution channels. And the target is to integrate one new client every month. And we're doing so far. I think we did like six clients this year, which is great.
Amazing. Yeah, that's beautiful. I have hundreds of thousands of questions, but just for the matter of the time, I want to pass on the floor to you guys. Like, if you want to say anything to the audience, and also if there are any upcoming news and development that you'd like to share.
So up and coming, like I said, I mean the account abstraction piece is very very exciting, but also like and next thing to look forward is on-chain incentives for GPU providers. I think that's going to open up a whole new gamut because today, I mean, there's a lot of need for GPUs, and there are a lot of people that want to build data centers and purchase GPUs, and there's a lot of capital available too. But I want to see this capital come from a decentralized world rather than centralized world because that way you can have ownership by the people that may not be large companies but rather small companies and get real world yield back from these GPUs because these GPUs are in high demand. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here that you'll see over the next year called the GPU Fi or AI Fi, right? It's a new sector that's coming up. But keep your eyes out for opportunities. There's a lot of incredible opportunity if you want to start contributing in this new financing a world. To remind the audience that 5% of global GDP will be spent on AI compute by 2030. So that opportunity, I like to have it in keep it in the decentralized world rather than the private sector banks that are very aggressive in selling their loan offerings.
Amazing. Anything to share, Zach?
I would say, to Greg's point, like obviously we have so much going on across the network. We have a couple side events this week. If you want to come see us in person, we're going to be tomorrow at Overstory. You can find those links on Luma. Check us out at akash.network. You can find everything you need there to get started. Console.akash.network if you want to deploy. And I would say check us out and you can get started.
Yeah, well, amazing, Greg and Zach. I had a blast. I hope you all had too. And thank you so much.
Thank you.